Europe looked peaceful, a whole continent wrapped in the glossy, golden illusion of the Belle Epoque. The great empires felt invincible, right? Just completely basking in their own grandeur, wealth, and culture. But beneath that calm, polished surface, a really dangerous tension was steadily growing. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going back in time to explore a world that was unknowingly standing right on the edge of the abyss. Let's set the stage.
This quote right here perfectly captures the profound hubris of the European powers at the dawn of the 20th century. I mean, think about it. You had Great Britain with its vast, unmatched global navy. You had Germany boasting this relentless, cutting-edge industrial might. And France radiating cultural supremacy. They were all so blinded by their own incredible success that they were completely oblivious to the gathering storm.
Section 1. Powerful Empires in Europe.
To understand how the catastrophe actually happened, we first have to meet the major players. By the year 1900, Europe was dominated by sprawling empires that were absolutely convinced this was a permanent, unbreakable status quo. But the sheer scale of their growth was about to disrupt everything. The rapid industrialization of this era dramatically shifted the global balance of power. Germany, in particular, was experiencing a massive explosion in steel, chemical, and electrical production. We're talking corporate giants like Krupp and Bayer leading the charge. Suddenly, the label made in Germany was rivaling British dominance. And let me tell you, this sudden rise made the older empires incredibly nervous.
Section 2. The Alliance System.
So originally, figures like Germany's Chancellor Otto von Bismarck created these really complex webs of defensive treaties. And the initial goal was actually pretty sensible: maintain peace and balance. But over time, without Bismarck's careful management, these treaties calcified. Europe quietly split into a stark, dangerous contrast. On one side, you've got the Triple Entente: Britain, France, and Russia. On the other, the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. These pacts created a terrifying reality, because an attack on one single member would inevitably drag everyone else into a massive, unstoppable war. The spring traps were officially set.
And you have to understand, these alliances weren't just polite political handshakes. They were deep, binding military commitments. General staffs were actively coordinating. For example, France was literally financing and supporting the construction of Russia's strategic railways. Why? Well, to ensure Russian troops can mobilize quickly against Germany if a war broke out. The gears of a continental war machine were already locking together.
Section 3. Engines of War. But alliances alone don't start wars, right? You need engines to drive the conflict forward. Economic rivalry fueled a ferocious era of new imperialism, as empires basically scrambled for resources, captive markets, and absolute global prestige. Which brings us to a huge disruptor: Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. He adopted this volatile, aggressive strategy known as Weltpolitik, or world policy. The Kaiser basically demanded that Germany transform into a global empire and claim its rightful place in the sun. This aggressive posture was a direct, unmistakable challenge to the global and naval supremacy that the British Empire had enjoyed for a full century.
And this ambition, it sparked a fierce, incredibly expensive, and exponentially growing naval arms race. German Admiral Tirpitz developed a risk theory. The idea was to build a fleet so strong it would actually threaten Britain into diplomatic submission. In response, the British public absolutely panicked and demanded action, famously chanting in the streets, "We want aid and we won't wait." This drove a frantic, massive shipbuilding response.
Then, the game completely changed in 1906 with an absolute technological marvel, the HMS Dreadnought. This revolutionary British battleship was so incredibly advanced, so heavily armed with its 12-inch guns, that it instantly made every older warship on Earth completely obsolete. It effectively reset naval power back to zero. Imagine that. This poured absolute gasoline on the arms race, forcing Germany to try and completely match Britain's massive technological lead.
But this wasn't just about ships and steel. Militarism deeply permeated everyday society. A real cult of the uniform grew rapidly. Military prestige became the ultimate measure of national pride. It was taught in schools, praised in newspapers. Generals became these political idols, and they developed incredibly rigid, complex mobilization plans where literally every hour mattered. Without even realizing it, European society was psychologically preparing itself for a great clash.
The most famous, and frankly the most deadly of these plans, was Germany's Schlieffen Plan. Germany was deeply paranoid about facing a two-front war against both France and Russia simultaneously, so their strategy was entirely dependent on unstoppable speed. The plan was to swiftly crush France by sweeping through neutral Belgium in the west and then immediately pivot east to face a slower Russia. But its deadly inflexibility meant that once mobilization started, there was absolutely no room to stop, pause, or negotiate.
Section 4. The Balkan Powder Keg. While London and Berlin were busy building dreadnoughts, we need to turn our attention away from the great capitals and look to the unstable fringes of Europe. The Balkans became the single most dangerous arena on the continent. You had the rapid decline of the Ottoman Empire, leaving this massive power vacuum. You had new ambitious states like Serbia dreaming of uniting South Slavic lands. You had Austria-Hungary terrified that these nationalist movements would fracture their diverse empire. And behind all of it stood Russia, aggressively posing as the great protector of the Slavic people.
Let's walk through this breathless sequence of crises. In 1908, Austria provocatively annexed Bosnia, which absolutely infuriated Serbia and Russia. Then came the explosive Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913, where the Ottoman Empire was largely driven out of the European continent. Each of these events ruined diplomatic relations, built intense, deep-seated hostility, and proved beyond a doubt that this region was a pressure cooker just waiting to blow.
What makes this so crucial to understand, even today, is how localized disputes routinely threaten to become pan-European crises. Because of the rigid alliance systems we discussed earlier, foreign policymakers were emboldened to refuse compromise. They believed their heavily armed allies would always back them up, no matter what. It was a terrifying, high-stakes game of great power brinkmanship, and time was running out.
Section 5. A ticking time bomb.
By the summer of 1914, all the intricate mechanisms for total destruction were fully locked into place. The continent wasn't just on the edge of war, it was a highly calibrated ticking time bomb. Let's summarize the core engines of this fatal mix: unchecked, aggressive militarism, rigid, uncompromising alliances, ruthless global imperialism, and virulent nationalism creating those explosive Balkan tensions. Together, they formed an inescapable fatal trap for the people of Europe.
I really want you to remember this. World War I didn't begin in a moment. It was built over years of tension. The Great War wasn't a sudden, unpredictable accident. It was the catastrophic, meticulously built result of a system obsessed with power, paralyzed by rivalry, and completely blinded by pride.
Which leaves us with a final, chilling question to ponder. If the entire European order was this rigged to detonate, if the powder was stacked so incredibly high, was the spark in Sarajevo merely a tragedy or an absolute inevitability? Think about how easily complex systems can cascade into total disaster. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning the past.